The palace was unusually quiet that morning. The usual bustle of staff preparing for another day of royal engagements seemed muted, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. But in one small corner of the sprawling household, a secret had quietly surfaced, one that threatened to upend the carefully maintained image of harmony within the royal family. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Princess Charlotte, only 8 years old at the time, had confided in her nanny something that no one expected, something that would ripple through Buckingham Palace and beyond. She had spoken of Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, and her words were nothing short of shocking. "Meghan was mean to me," Charlotte reportedly said, her young voice carrying a weight far beyond her years. From the outside, Meghan Markle appeared to the world as a polished, charismatic figure, an actress turned royal who seemed to blend modernity with tradition effortlessly. Fans lauded her for her advocacy, her public speeches, her championing of causes from women's rights to mental health. Media outlets, both supportive and critical, painted her as a woman navigating the complexities of royal life with courage and determination. Yet behind closed doors, according to Charlotte's revelation, a different picture emerged. A picture of tension, friction, and emotional strain that even the youngest member of the royal household could perceive. It is rare for a child so young to articulate their feelings about adults in positions of power, and rarer still for those feelings to touch the world in such a direct and consequential way. Charlotte's confession to her nanny, whispered perhaps in the intimacy of playtime or the quiet of a nursery, is a window into the human side of the royal family, one that is often hidden from public view. How does a young princess navigate emotions like disappointment, frustration, and fear? What does it say about the adult figures in her life that she felt compelled to share these feelings in secrecy? And most importantly, what happens when those private words inevitably find their way into the public consciousness? To understand the full impact of Charlotte's revelation, we must first examine the environment in which she was raised. The life of a royal child is a world apart from that of ordinary children, filled with strict protocols, public scrutiny, and an expectation of poise and maturity far beyond their years. From the moment of her birth, Charlotte has been in the spotlight, photographed at christenings, at family outings, and in candid moments that quickly became iconic. Her every smile, every gesture, every interaction is observed and analyzed. But even amidst the public adoration and the glittering ceremonies, Charlotte remains a child, a young girl learning to make sense of her world, her emotions, and the people around her. It is in this context that her confession about Meghan Markle takes on profound significance. Charlotte's observation was not made in isolation. It came from repeated experiences, moments that accumulated to create a lasting impression on a sensitive young mind. The nanny, a trusted figure in Charlotte's life, became the vessel for her voice, the person who could bear witness to her truth without judgment. In these quiet exchanges, Charlotte revealed something that had been quietly brewing, a discomfort, a sense of unease, and perhaps even fear. It was a small, simple statement, yet its implications were vast. A young royal had formed an opinion about a member of the household that would challenge public narratives and invite intense scrutiny. The timing of this revelation is also critical. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's exit from frontline royal duties, widely known as Megxit, had already shaken the monarchy and sparked intense media coverage worldwide. Public opinion was divided. Supporters of the Sussexes praised their pursuit of independence and privacy, while critics questioned motives, decisions, and behavior. In this climate, the words of an 8-year-old princess are amplified beyond what one might expect from a typical family dynamic. The innocence of Charlotte's voice juxtaposed with the complexities of adult relationships within the royal household creates a tension that is both compelling and deeply human. It is important to note that Charlotte's words were not uttered in anger or malice. They were expressions of a child's perception, filtered through the lens of her experiences and her understanding of relationships. Children have a remarkable ability to sense nuances in adult behavior, to pick up on subtle shifts in tone, expression, and emotion that often go unnoticed by others. Charlotte, growing up in a household filled with both love and expectation, was uniquely positioned to notice patterns of behavior that others might dismiss. Her confession to her nanny, therefore, is not just a comment about Meghan Markle. It is a reflection of her intelligence, her sensitivity, and her capacity for observation. But what exactly did Charlotte mean when she said Meghan was mean to her? Was it a single incident, a series of small interactions, or an ongoing pattern that she had interpreted through the eyes of a child? The details remain closely guarded, as they were shared in confidence with a trusted caregiver. Yet even without full disclosure, the revelation has ignited speculation. The media, ever vigilant for stories of palace intrigue, immediately seized upon the notion that a young princess had voiced discomfort with a member of the royal family. Social media erupted with commentary, opinion pieces, and theories. Royal enthusiasts dissected every possible nuance, attempting to reconstruct scenarios that could explain Charlotte's perspective. At the heart of this story is a fundamental question. How do adults in positions of authority and influence impact the children around them? Meghan Markle, as a stepmother figure in Charlotte's life, held a position of proximity and power. The way she interacted with Charlotte, intentionally or unintentionally, left an impression. Children are remarkably attuned to emotional climates. They can sense tension, perceive unspoken rules, and internalize subtle forms of judgment. Charlotte's words, then, are a testament not only to her own observations but to the broader dynamics of the household. This revelation also invites reflection on the responsibilities of caretakers within the royal household. The nanny, serving as both observer and confidant, plays a pivotal role in interpreting, validating, and responding to the emotions of a young princess. The trust between Charlotte and her nanny highlights the importance of emotional support structures for children, especially in high-pressure environments where public scrutiny is constant. It is through these quiet, behind-the-scenes interactions that the emotional life of a royal child is both nurtured and protected. As we delve deeper into this story, we will explore the context surrounding Charlotte's revelation, the historical backdrop of royal family dynamics, and the implications for public perception of Meghan Markle. We will examine expert insights on child psychology, the impact of adult behavior on young children, and the broader cultural implications of such a confession. We will also consider the human element, the emotions, the vulnerability, and the courage it takes for a child to voice her feelings in a world that watches her every move. By the end of this video, viewers will not only understand the significance of Princess Charlotte's words, but will also gain insight into the intricate web of relationships, power dynamics, and emotional realities that define life within the royal family. This is not merely a story of conflict or criticism. It is a story of perception, trust, and the quiet bravery of a young girl navigating a world far larger than most children can comprehend. In the next chapters, we will explore Charlotte's daily life, the subtle interactions that shaped her impressions, and the moments leading up to her confession. We will investigate how Meghan Markle's presence in the household influenced the emotional landscape for the young princess, and we will hear from experts who can shed light on what such experiences mean for a child's development. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, often masks the human stories that unfold within its walls. Princess Charlotte's voice, though young, pierces through that veneer, offering a rare glimpse into the emotional truth of life as a royal child. Her confession is a reminder that even in a world of protocol, public appearances, and historical legacy, the feelings of a child are potent, meaningful, and capable of sparking discussions that reverberate far beyond the nursery walls. And as we follow this story, one question looms larger than any other. What will the palace do with this revelation? How will Meghan Markle respond? And how will the public interpret the words of a young princess who has, for the first time, dared to break her silence? The sun had barely begun to rise over Kensington Palace, casting a soft golden hue over the sprawling gardens and immaculate lawns. Inside, the palace was already alive with quiet activity. Staff members moved briskly through corridors lined with portraits of kings, queens, and past generations, each step measured, each gesture precise. This was the world Princess Charlotte had grown up in, a place where tradition and expectation coexisted with the pressures of constant public scrutiny. From the outside, it seemed almost magical. A young princess with a life filled with privilege, luxury, and experiences unimaginable to most children. But within these walls, the everyday life of a royal child was governed by a strict balance of protocol, family dynamics, and personal observation. Charlotte's morning typically began in the company of her nanny, a trusted figure who had been with her family for years and had become more than just a caretaker. This nanny was her confidant, a stabilizing presence in a world filled with both awe-inspiring grandeur and subtle complexities. They shared small routines, breakfast together, preparation for school, conversations about daily schedules. But within these ordinary moments lay the extraordinary, the nurturing of a young girl navigating her role within one of the most scrutinized families in the world. The nanny knew Charlotte not only as a princess but as a child with emotions, fears, and opinions that needed acknowledgement and care. It was in this environment that Charlotte began forming her observations about the adults around her. Every glance, every tone of voice, every interaction was part of a tapestry she quietly examined. The palace, though ornate and structured, was also a stage for human behavior, and Charlotte, in her innocence and perceptiveness, was an astute observer. She noted how her parents, William and Catherine, balanced authority with warmth, how older relatives adhered strictly to protocol, and how new members of the household integrated, or struggled to integrate, into the established rhythm. The arrival of Meghan Markle had introduced a new dynamic into this carefully orchestrated environment. Meghan, elegant and assertive, brought with her not only a public persona familiar to the world, but also private habits, expectations, and behaviors that would inevitably intersect with the daily life of the household. To Charlotte, who had spent the first years of her life learning the rules, observing interactions, and forming judgments based on consistency and care, Meghan's presence was noticeable in ways both subtle and profound. How Meghan spoke, how she responded to requests, and how she positioned herself within the family structure. All these details were absorbed and internalized by the young princess. Royal children live lives that are simultaneously protected and exposed. Charlotte's days were carefully scheduled, filled with educational lessons, playtime, and official appearances. Yet she was never allowed the complete freedom of a child outside palace walls. Every action could be observed, every moment potentially captured by cameras or scrutinized by staff. In this world, even minor conflicts or small slights take on significance, and a child's interpretation of adult behavior can carry weight far beyond what might be expected elsewhere. Charlotte, sensitive and aware, had begun to recognize patterns that troubled her. While adults might brush off minor misunderstandings or dismiss moments as trivial, Charlotte's perception was precise, her judgment forming in the context of her own experiences and expectations. The royal household itself was a complex ecosystem. Nannies, tutors, housekeepers, and aides all played essential roles, maintaining both the operational and emotional fabric of daily life. For Charlotte, each relationship within the household offered a lens through which she could understand human behavior. Her interactions with her nanny, in particular, were formative. The nanny served not only as a guide and protector but also as a safe space for expression, a sounding board for feelings that could not otherwise be voiced. It was within this secure environment that Charlotte began articulating her observations about Meghan, the new figure whose presence had subtly altered the household dynamic. As the weeks and months unfolded, small incidents accumulated in Charlotte's awareness. A sharp word, a dismissive tone, or an unkind remark, even when intended innocuously, was absorbed by her perceptive mind. Children are remarkably sensitive to shifts in emotional energy, noticing what adults may not consciously display. Charlotte, attuned to both the rules of the palace and the emotional undercurrents of her environment, began to internalize these interactions. Each moment, while individually minor, built into a broader impression, forming the basis of the confession she would later share with her nanny. Yet life in the royal household was not solely defined by tension or observation. Charlotte's upbringing also included moments of joy, wonder, and play. The palace gardens provided endless space for exploration. Afternoons were filled with reading, music, and creative expression. These moments of normalcy were juxtaposed against the backdrop of royal duties and protocol, creating a duality that Charlotte navigated daily. Within this balance, She developed not only resilience but also a keen sense of discernment, an ability to separate kindness from formality, warmth from performance, and authenticity from pretense. It is essential to understand that Princess Charlotte's observations were shaped by both her experiences and her innate temperament. She was a child who valued fairness, consistency, and respect. When interactions deviated from these principles, it registered deeply. Her observations were not born of bias or rebellion. They were the natural response of a sensitive, intelligent child to inconsistencies in adult behavior. The nanny, as a trusted adult who understood both Charlotte's emotional language and the nuances of palace life, became the first recipient of her words, a guardian of her truth and an interpreter of her feelings. Charlotte's relationship with her parents also influenced how she processed these experiences. William and Catherine had cultivated a household in which emotional expression was allowed within boundaries, where empathy and guidance coexisted with the demands of public life. In this environment, Charlotte felt secure enough to recognize discomfort and seek guidance, even if it meant discussing sensitive observations about another adult in the household. Her choice to confide in her nanny illustrates both her trust in the adults closest to her and her courage in voicing her perspective. By the time Charlotte's confession about Meghan was shared, the foundation had already been laid. The structure of the household, the relationships within it, and Charlotte's own perceptiveness combined to create a scenario in which a young princess could articulate an observation that would reverberate far beyond the nursery walls. It was not a spontaneous remark but the culmination of ongoing experiences, carefully noticed and thoughtfully internalized. The significance of her words lies not only in their content but in the context in which they were formed. A highly structured, emotionally complex, and intensely observed environment where even the youngest members develop an acute understanding of human behavior. The royal household, in all its grandeur and tradition, can be both a sanctuary and a stage. For Charlotte, it was a place where she learned lessons about respect, authority, and the subtleties of interpersonal relationships. It was also a space where she began forming her own judgments, guided by intuition, observation, and the trusted counsel of her nanny. The interactions that shaped her impressions of Meghan Markle were part of a broader narrative of childhood in the royal sphere, an intricate blend of expectation, exposure, and personal reflection. As we move forward in this story, understanding the environment in which Charlotte was raised is critical. The palace is not just a building of historical significance. It is a living ecosystem of relationships, power dynamics, and emotional currents. Within this ecosystem, every interaction carries meaning, and every child learns to navigate a world that is simultaneously privileged and demanding. Princess Charlotte's confession, though brief, is a window into this intricate world, a reflection of both the pressures and the realities of life as a young royal, and a foreshadowing of the revelations that would soon captivate the public imagination. To the world, Meghan Markle had long been a symbol of modern royalty, a bridge between Hollywood glamour and the traditions of the British monarchy. From the moment her engagement to Prince Harry was announced, media outlets across the globe celebrated her charisma, intelligence, and advocacy work. Her speeches were praised for their poise, her appearances at charity events lauded for their sophistication, and her every public gesture dissected and admired. Meghan's image had been carefully crafted, consciously or not, to reflect someone who was compassionate, articulate, and relentlessly positive. A public figure many believed could redefine what it meant to be a member of the royal family. However, life behind palace walls often diverges sharply from public perception. Royals are humans first, and human interactions are rarely as polished or harmonious as their public appearances suggest. Meghan's public persona, meticulously curated through media appearances, interviews, and social campaigns, could not always conceal the private realities of daily life within the palace. For Charlotte, whose world was defined by observation, routine, and subtle social cues, Meghan's private behavior was as much a part of her understanding of the household as any official event or formal duty. Charlotte's perspective, of course, was that of a child. Unfiltered, sensitive, and attuned to emotional nuances adults might dismiss. While Meghan presented herself to the public as warm, inclusive, and approachable, Charlotte's experiences painted a more complex picture. Children notice things adults sometimes overlook. The tone of a voice when speaking to them, the expression that flickers across a face in a fleeting moment, or the way someone responds to requests or questions. These moments, seemingly insignificant to an adult, can leave a... It is not unusual for public figures to present different faces in private and public. Meghan, like many in high-profile positions, had to navigate a world of expectation and scrutiny, which undoubtedly influenced her behavior behind closed doors. Publicly, she was expected to smile, to support charitable causes with visible enthusiasm, and to maintain the dignity of her role. Privately, however, pressures, both internal and external, could manifest in frustration, impatience, or moments of tension. For someone like Charlotte, these inconsistencies were noticeable. What adults might rationalize as stress or context, a child interprets in simpler, more immediate terms. Kindness or meanness, fairness or unfairness, welcome or dismissal. Reports and anecdotes about Meghan's behavior behind the scenes began to circulate as the Sussexes' presence in the royal household grew more pronounced. Some staff members, whose discretion is paramount in such an environment, have hinted at moments where Meghan's assertiveness came across as harsh, particularly in interactions involving protocol, planning, or communication with younger family members. While these accounts are often subtle and anecdotal, they provide insight into a dynamic that Charlotte, in her perceptive way, would have observed firsthand. Consider the interactions that take place during ordinary palace routines. Breakfasts, playtime, school preparation, and informal family gatherings are spaces where tone, patience, and empathy become immediately evident. A single word, a fleeting expression, or a dismissive gesture can leave a lasting impression on a child. Charlotte, growing up with a heightened awareness of the social hierarchies and emotional climates of her environment, would have been particularly sensitive to these cues. Her assessment of Meghan as being mean was not a whimsical statement. It was a child's authentic reflection of repeated observations and experiences. The contrast between Meghan's public image and the private experiences perceived by Charlotte is striking, and it highlights a tension that often accompanies high-profile figures living in intensely scrutinized households. Meghan had mastered the art of public engagement, delivering speeches, attending formal ceremonies, and managing global media narratives. Yet within the walls of Kensington Palace, the subtleties of day-to-day interactions told a different story. While many adults might contextualize moments of tension as the result of stress, high stakes, or differing expectations, Charlotte processed these moments in straightforward, emotionally honest terms. A remark that seemed minor to an adult might have registered as hurtful, dismissive, or even mean to a young princess. It is also important to acknowledge the challenges Meghan faced in integrating into a household that had its own established rhythms, hierarchies, and unspoken rules. As an outsider in a centuries-old institution, she had to navigate relationships with staff, extended family, and children who were accustomed to a specific dynamic. Balancing her identity, expectations, and public responsibilities while assimilating into this environment created pressures that could, at times, influence behavior. Yet the perception of a child is rarely concerned with these complexities. Charlotte's assessment, simple and candid, was based on the immediate effects she felt and witnessed. Charlotte's keen observation of Meghan's behavior aligns with studies on child perception. Children are highly sensitive to the emotional states of adults in their environment. They can detect inconsistencies between words and actions, perceive shifts in tone, and respond emotionally to subtle cues. For Charlotte, repeated experiences, whether an impatient response, a harsh word, or a cold gesture, accumulated into a broader impression of Meghan. When she later confided in her nanny that Meghan was mean, she was articulating a perception that had been forming over time, grounded in authentic, emotionally felt experiences. Public perception, of course, is influenced heavily by media portrayal. Meghan's every public act was scrutinized, praised, or criticized by journalists, commentators, and the public alike. Supporters highlighted her charitable work, her dedication to social causes, and her ability to connect with diverse audiences. Critics, conversely, examined interviews, public statements, and past roles in Hollywood, often framing her as ambitious or controlling. Charlotte, shielded from the broader media discourse but deeply attuned to personal interactions, formed judgments based solely on what she saw and experienced directly, a perspective unfiltered by political or media considerations. The divergence between Meghan's public persona and Charlotte's private observations provides insight into the complex realities of life in the royal household. To the world, Meghan represented sophistication, advocacy, and grace. To Charlotte, she represented a figure whose behavior in private moments, albeit subtle, felt unkind or mean. This contrast underscores a central theme of the story. The perception of reality differs based on perspective, and even the youngest members of a family can see truths that others overlook. In many ways, Charlotte's perspective challenges adult assumptions about what children notice and internalize. Adults often assume that children are oblivious to nuance, yet research and anecdotal evidence consistently show that children are astute observers of human behavior. They notice tone, intention, and emotional energy. Charlotte's assessment of Meghan as mean reflects this insight, an honest, unembellished interpretation of what she experienced. It is a reminder that even in the gilded confines of a palace, the emotional experiences of a child are authentic, immediate, and meaningful. Charlotte's words also carry broader implications for understanding family dynamics in high-profile households. The royal family, with its centuries of tradition, public scrutiny, and intricate relationships, operates on multiple levels simultaneously: duty, public image, personal bonds, and emotional well-being. Within this ecosystem, a child's voice is both insightful and revealing. When Charlotte described Meghan as mean, she was not making a calculated statement. She was providing a window into her lived experience, a reflection of emotional realities that are often invisible to adults focused on diplomacy, protocol, or image management. As we continue exploring this story, it becomes clear that Charlotte's perception is not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of experiences within the household. Her observations, expressed in confidence to her nanny, highlight the complex interplay between public perception, private behavior, and child observation. Meghan's dual identity, as a public figure and as a member of the royal household, creates scenarios where the impact of minor actions is magnified in the eyes of those closest to her. Charlotte, navigating this environment with sensitivity and intelligence, noticed nuances that others might dismiss, and her decision to confide these observations signals both trust and bravery. The divergence between Meghan's public image and Charlotte's private observations also raises questions about how children internalize adult behavior. It forces a consideration of emotional literacy in children, the importance of supportive caregivers, and the ways in which even subtle interactions can shape perceptions and feelings. Charlotte's perspective, though expressed simply, resonates with anyone who has experienced dissonance between public persona and private conduct, between expectation and reality, or between kindness shown to the world and behavior experienced in personal spaces. In the following chapters, we will examine the specifics of Charlotte's confession, the interactions that shaped it, and the broader reactions from staff, family, and the public. We will explore how her observations fit into the larger narrative of royal family life, how they illuminate the private realities behind public appearances, and why they have captured the attention of the world. Meghan Markle's duality, publicly celebrated, privately scrutinized, serves as a backdrop to Charlotte's words, highlighting the tension between perception and reality, between performance and authenticity, and between adult complexity and childlike clarity. In the intricate world of royal households, few figures hold as much quiet influence as the nanny, tasked with the care, guidance, and emotional support of the youngest family members. A royal nanny is both a guardian and a confidant, a person who balances discretion, warmth, and authority within an environment defined by tradition, protocol, and scrutiny. For Princess Charlotte, the nanny was more than just a caretaker. She was a trusted observer, a sounding board, and a safe haven. It was to her that Charlotte chose to reveal her feelings about Meghan Markle, a decision that would carry weight far beyond the nursery walls. The role of a royal nanny is multifaceted. Beyond the basic responsibilities of feeding, dressing, and supervising children, they provide emotional anchoring in a world that is anything but ordinary. Charlotte's nanny had spent countless hours understanding her moods, deciphering her reactions, and fostering her sense of security. In a household where the pressures of royal life often seeped into the most mundane moments, the nanny offered stability. She was the adult who could interpret a frown, calm a tantrum, or gently guide Charlotte through the complexities of palace life. More importantly, she was someone with whom Charlotte could share thoughts that she might otherwise keep to herself. The trust between Charlotte and her nanny was not built overnight. It developed over years of consistent care, attention, and respect. The nanny understood the balance between nurturing independence and providing guidance, between allowing Charlotte to express her feelings and ensuring that those expressions remained safe and constructive. In this environment, Charlotte felt secure enough to articulate discomforts that might have otherwise remained unspoken. When she spoke of Meghan Markle, it was within this context of safety and trust, a private moment that reflected both her own courage and the nanny's role as a guardian of her emotional well-being. Charlotte's confession was simple in words but profound in implication. She described Meghan as being mean to her, a candid observation from a child navigating adult dynamics. The nanny, trained to recognize the importance of emotional cues in young children, understood that these words were not mere whimsy or exaggeration. They were the articulation of genuine feelings, a glimpse into the internal world of a child who had observed patterns of behavior and drawn conclusions based on repeated experiences. The nanny's role was to validate Charlotte's feelings without judgment, to provide reassurance, and to interpret the nuances of what had been shared. The palace setting adds layers of complexity to this relationship. Unlike ordinary households, the royal environment is highly structured, with roles, hierarchies, and unspoken expectations dictating interactions. The nanny is both participant and observer, navigating the delicate balance between serving the family and protecting the children. In Charlotte's case, the nanny had to consider the broader implications of Meghan's interactions with the young princess. Each remark, gesture, or moment of tension was part of a larger mosaic, and the nanny's responsibility was to understand, mediate, and guide Charlotte through her emotions while maintaining discretion and loyalty to the family. Charlotte's ability to confide in her nanny also underscores her emotional intelligence. Even at a young age, she recognized who could be trusted, who would listen without immediate judgment, and who could provide guidance without overstepping. This discernment is remarkable, particularly in a household where every adult carries influence and every action is observed. By choosing to share her perspective with the nanny, Charlotte was exercising agency, asserting her voice, and seeking validation for her feelings in a manner that was both thoughtful and emotionally astute. The nanny's response to Charlotte was equally significant. A skilled caregiver in such a position must balance empathy with guidance, ensuring that the child's feelings are acknowledged while providing context and reassurance. In this case, the nanny listened carefully, validated Charlotte's emotions, and offered support, creating a safe emotional container in which the young princess could process her experiences. This interaction was pivotal. It not only allowed Charlotte to articulate her observations, but also reinforced the importance of having trusted adults who can serve as emotional anchors in high-pressure environments. It is worth considering the subtlety of Charlotte's perspective. She was not voicing complaints about public appearances, media scrutiny, or the pressures of royal duty. Instead, she was responding to specific interactions in her immediate environment, assessing the warmth, tone, and intent of the adults around her. Meghan Markle, as a stepmother figure, represented a new dynamic in the household, and Charlotte's experiences with her were filtered through the lens of childlike honesty. The nanny, understanding the weight of such observations, treated them with the seriousness they deserved, recognizing that even brief remarks or gestures could have lasting emotional impact on a young child. This moment of confession also highlights the broader theme of trust within the royal household. In an environment where privacy is limited and public perception looms large, the ability to confide in a trusted adult is essential. Charlotte's nanny served as that bridge between private experience and understanding, allowing the princess to express feelings that might otherwise have been suppressed. The act of speaking and being heard is foundational to emotional development, and in this instance, It provided insight into how children within high-profile families perceive and respond to complex social dynamics. Moreover, the nanny's role extended beyond simply listening. She had to consider how to guide Charlotte in interpreting experiences without instilling fear, resentment, or confusion. In doing so, the nanny helped Charlotte develop a framework for understanding relationships, empathy, and boundaries. This guidance was subtle yet powerful, shaping the way Charlotte internalized her experiences and ultimately allowing her to articulate her feelings with clarity and honesty. The significance of Charlotte's confession lies not just in the content but in the act itself. Children rarely voice critiques of adult behavior, particularly in households where authority, hierarchy, and public scrutiny converge. That Charlotte chose to speak, and that she selected her nanny as the confidant, speaks volumes about both her character and the environment cultivated by those responsible for her care. It demonstrates that even within the most formalized, high-stakes households, children can find spaces to express truth, seek understanding, and assert their perceptions. Charlotte's ability to observe and articulate her experiences also reflects broader patterns of child perception. Psychological research shows that children are highly attuned to emotional climates, capable of discerning subtle cues, and sensitive to inconsistencies in behavior. For Charlotte, repeated observations, whether a sharp tone, dismissive gesture, or perceived lack of warmth, formed the basis of her assessment of Megan. The nanny's role was to acknowledge these perceptions without distortion, providing both validation and context in a manner appropriate for a child navigating complex adult interactions. In essence, the nanny was more than a caretaker. She was a mediator, interpreter, and guardian of emotional truth. The private exchange between Charlotte and her nanny illuminates the importance of such figures in high-profile households, highlighting how children process experiences that might be invisible to adults focused on protocol or public image. The trust Charlotte placed in her nanny was a crucial element in this dynamic, allowing a young princess to articulate her feelings honestly and safely. As we proceed to the next chapters, the implications of Charlotte's confession will become clearer. The nanny's role as confidant, observer, and emotional anchor provides a lens through which we can understand the significance of Charlotte's words. This chapter lays the foundation for exploring the specific moments that led to her observation, the broader reactions within the palace, and the ways in which these private experiences intersected with public perception. The trust between Charlotte and her nanny, and the courage it took to voice her feelings, serves as the emotional core of the story, a reminder that even in the most prestigious households, the voices of children carry profound meaning. The moment had been quietly building over months, perhaps even years. Small interactions, fleeting gestures, and subtle tones had accumulated in the mind of Princess Charlotte, forming a perception that was uniquely hers. For a child raised in the meticulously managed environment of the royal household, every nuance mattered. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, every expression observed could carry significance far beyond its immediate context. And then, one day, in the privacy and trust of her nursery, Charlotte chose to break her silence. She confided in her nanny. The words were simple but carried immense weight. Megan was mean to her. To an adult, this might sound straightforward or even trivial, but within the confines of Buckingham Palace, where privacy is scarce and public image is everything, the statement was nothing short of extraordinary. Here was an 8-year-old princess articulating her feelings about a stepmother figure, conveying observations that could shift the narrative surrounding one of the most scrutinized members of the royal family. It is important to emphasize the context in which Charlotte spoke. She was not speaking publicly, nor was she attempting to influence media perception. These words were shared in confidence, in a space where she felt safe, understood, and heard. The nanny, her longtime caretaker and emotional anchor, was the only adult present. This choice highlights both Charlotte's courage and her discernment. Even at a young age, she recognized the value of trust and the importance of voicing her feelings to someone who could provide guidance without judgment. Charlotte's statement reflected a child's unfiltered perception of events. To understand its significance, it is necessary to examine the subtle interactions that likely led to this confession. Consider the microcosm of a royal child's life, a play session interrupted by adult stress, a request for attention met with impatience, or a tone that conveys frustration rather than warmth. These moments, though seemingly minor to adults, register deeply in children. Charlotte, highly observant and emotionally sensitive, internalized these cues and drew conclusions about the behavior of those around her. When she described Megan as mean, she was articulating a pattern of experience, not a single isolated event. The act of confiding in her nanny also demonstrates Charlotte's growing sense of agency. In a world where so much is dictated by protocol, tradition, and the expectations of adults, Charlotte was asserting her voice. She was choosing to express her perspective, to make her feelings known, and to seek validation from a trusted adult. Charlotte's statement is further significant because it underscores the role of narrative in shaping public perception. Even in the absence of direct exposure, the experiences of children can inform understanding of household dynamics. By confiding in her nanny, Charlotte created a private narrative that illuminates the emotional realities of palace life. This narrative is not intended for public consumption, yet its existence challenges the controlled storytelling often associated with royal figures, reminding us that the human element of family life can defy polished appearances. The confession also invites reflection on the power of words. Charlotte's articulation of her feelings, though simple, carries meaning far beyond its literal expression. It signals awareness, observation, and interpretation. It communicates that even at a young age, she could distinguish between kindness and perceived meanness, warmth and dismissal, care and indifference. The depth of understanding embedded in a child's perspective is often underestimated, but in this case, it provides a clear, compelling, and emotionally resonant insight into life within the royal household. As we explore the aftermath of Charlotte's confession in subsequent chapters, the significance of her words becomes more apparent. We will examine the broader implications for family dynamics, the reactions of palace staff, and the subtle ways in which private experiences shape public narratives. Charlotte's willingness to speak, combined with the nanny's role as confidant and interpreter, forms the foundation for understanding not only her perspective but also the complex interplay of trust, observation, and emotional intelligence that defines the inner workings of the royal family. Ultimately, Charlotte's decision to break her silence is a testament to her maturity, courage, and perceptiveness. It demonstrates that even the youngest members of a household, no matter how public their lives, can observe, interpret, and articulate experiences that resonate with authenticity and emotional clarity. Her words, simple yet profound, offer a rare glimpse into the private realities of life behind palace walls, reminding us that children's voices, when heard and valued, provide insights that are as meaningful as those of adults. This confession marks a turning point in the narrative, a moment where observation becomes communication, perception becomes revelation, and a child's voice echoes far beyond its immediate audience. It sets the stage for examining the nuances of Meghan Markle's behavior, the broader family reactions, and the ways in which private experiences influence public understanding. In the chapters to come, we will delve deeper into the context, the dynamics, and the consequences of Charlotte's revelation, exploring how one simple statement, "Meghan was mean to me," carries weight in ways both personal and profound. To fully understand Princess Charlotte's perspective, it is essential to look beyond her personal experiences and consider the broader context of royal childhoods throughout history. The lives of royal children have long been shaped by strict protocol, immense public scrutiny, and expectations that far exceed those placed on ordinary children. From their earliest days, they are steeped in tradition, taught lessons of duty, decorum, and loyalty, and observed in ways that shape their understanding of relationships, authority, and emotional expression. Charlotte's experiences, including her perception of Meghan Markle's behavior, did not occur in isolation. They were influenced by centuries of precedent and a household culture defined by precedent, hierarchy, and ritual. Historically, royal children have lived under a dual lens, one of privilege and one of restriction. While they enjoy unparalleled resources, education, and exposure to global affairs, they are also subject to rigid expectations. They are observed continuously, their behavior dissected by staff, family members, and the public alike. For centuries, members of the British royal family were educated by private tutors, raised by nannies, and often shielded from normal childhood experiences. They learned at a young age that words, gestures, and actions carry weight, and that missteps, even innocent ones, could have consequences far beyond the nursery. This environment, while luxurious, imposes unique pressures on emotional development. Children are taught to internalize feelings, to navigate complex social hierarchies, and to perform with grace in public settings. Yet private interactions remain crucial. The guidance and care of trusted adults, such as nannies and governesses, are instrumental in helping young royals navigate their emotional landscapes. In Charlotte's case, her nanny provided that stabilizing presence, a consistent figure who could interpret, guide, and validate her experiences. This role has historically been a lifeline for royal children, ensuring that despite the rigid structure of palace life, they could develop emotionally and socially. Comparisons with historical examples illuminate Charlotte's situation. Consider Queen Victoria's children, raised in an era defined by strict hierarchy and rigid expectations. They were carefully monitored, disciplined, and taught lessons in duty and decorum from a very young age. Emotional expression was constrained, and the adults in their lives, governesses, tutors, and household staff, played crucial roles in shaping their perceptions of relationships and behavior. While the world around them celebrated protocol and public appearances, the private experiences of these children were shaped by observation, trust, and the guidance of those who understood both tradition and emotional nuance. Even in more recent royal generations, similar patterns emerge. Princess Diana, who would later become Charlotte's grandmother figure in legacy if not direct guidance, navigated a childhood filled with observation and expectation. She understood early that children perceive more than adults often realize, and she later emphasized empathy, emotional awareness, and the importance of caring relationships in her own parenting. Diana's approach was a departure from historical rigidity, highlighting the evolution of royal child-rearing to include emotional intelligence alongside protocol. Charlotte, growing up in this context, benefits from lessons passed down not only through parenting but also through household culture, emphasizing the importance of observation, discernment, and trust in those closest to her. Charlotte's recognition of Meghan Markle's behavior is therefore consistent with what can be expected from a child raised in such an environment. Royal children develop acute observational skills. They notice inconsistencies, subtleties, and patterns in adult behavior. They learn to interpret tone, facial expressions, and gestures with precision, often forming judgments based on accumulated experiences. When Charlotte described Meghan as mean, she was expressing a synthesis of repeated observations, an informed assessment shaped by her upbringing and the guidance of her trusted confidant, her nanny. It is also notable that historical royal children were often privy to complex household dynamics that included tension, rivalry, and negotiation among adults. Understanding these dynamics requires a combination of observation and interpretation. A child like Charlotte, raised in a household where adults are constantly managing relationships, public perception, and protocol, would naturally develop a sensitivity to subtle shifts in behavior. This sensitivity allows her to distinguish between moments of genuine warmth and instances where tone, word choice, or actions convey discomfort, impatience, or perceived unkindness. The history of royal child-rearing also underscores the importance of emotional support structures. Trusted nannies, governesses, and caregivers have long served as mediators and guides, helping children navigate complex interpersonal relationships while maintaining loyalty to the family. These adults play a pivotal role in interpreting events, providing reassurance, and helping children articulate feelings that might otherwise remain unspoken. Charlotte's ability to confide in her nanny about Meghan's behavior reflects this historical continuity, demonstrating how trusted adults have always been essential in shaping the understanding and emotional resilience of young royals. It is important to note that perception of meanness or unkindness by a child does not necessarily indicate malicious intent on the part of the adult. Children interpret behavior based on their emotional framework, which may differ from adult reasoning. What an adult views as a minor correction, stress-induced impatience, or necessary discipline can register as hurtful, dismissive, or even mean to a child. Charlotte's honesty in expressing her perception reflects both emotional intelligence and authenticity, qualities that have been cultivated historically in royal children to navigate the pressures of their environment while remaining grounded in their personal experiences. Charlotte's confession also serves as a reminder of the human side of monarchy. Historical accounts show that children in royal households, despite their privilege, experience vulnerability, fear, joy, and confusion just like any other child. Their observations, often formed through keen sensitivity, provide insight into the internal dynamics of households that are otherwise perceived only through public appearances. Charlotte's voice, like those of her predecessors, bridges the private and public, offering a glimpse into the real emotional landscape behind the pomp and ceremony. Moreover, the historical lens illustrates the consequences of speaking up, even in subtle ways. Royal children who voiced observations or discomfort had to navigate complex consequences, often balancing honesty with discretion. Charlotte's choice to confide in her nanny aligns with this historical precedent. She exercised judgment in selecting a trusted adult who could safely receive her words. This decision underscores both her awareness of household dynamics and her ability to navigate emotional landscapes with sophistication beyond her years. By examining historical experiences of royal children, it becomes clear that Charlotte's observations are neither trivial nor isolated. They are the product of a long-standing tradition in which young royals are taught to observe, interpret, and respond to their surroundings with care. Charlotte's ability to recognize patterns of behavior, articulate feelings, and seek guidance is a reflection of both personal temperament and the cultivated environment of the royal household. It is a continuation of a legacy in which emotional awareness, discernment, and trust in confidence are paramount. The patterns of observation, trust, and emotional response evident in Charlotte's confession reveal that even in a modern royal context, children perceive and internalize the subtleties of adult behavior in ways that are profound, meaningful, and impactful. Her words, though spoken quietly in the safe space of the nursery, carry echoes of centuries of royal tradition, emotional guidance, and the cultivation of perceptive young minds capable of interpreting complex social realities. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore the immediate palace reactions to Charlotte's confession, the ripple effects on household dynamics, and the broader implications for both Meghan Markle's role and the perception of royal children's voices. By situating Charlotte's observations within the historical context of royal child experiences, we gain a deeper appreciation for the courage and insight behind her words, and for the ways in which trusted adults, like her nanny, continue to shape and support the emotional development of children raised in extraordinary circumstances. Word of Princess Charlotte's confession, though initially private, could not remain entirely contained within the palace walls. In a household defined by hierarchy, staff networks, and centuries of tradition, even confidential exchanges carry the potential to ripple outward. Staff members, long accustomed to discretion but also to the unspoken circulation of information, began to notice subtle shifts in behavior and conversation. The revelation that Charlotte had described Meghan Markle as mean generated a quiet but palpable tension, one that underscored the delicate balance of relationships within the royal household. Palace staff have historically served as both observers and intermediaries. They are present for countless private moments, often seeing dynamics that public audiences cannot. Their roles require vigilance, discretion, and an acute sense of nuance. For many staff members, Charlotte's words were striking, not merely because they reflected on Meghan, a high-profile member of the household, but because they came from a child whose observations were often remarkably perceptive. Staff began to reflect on interactions, noting small gestures and tones that might have contributed to Charlotte's impression. In a palace where public appearances dominate headlines, these private perspectives offered a rare and humanizing insight into interpersonal dynamics. Rumors, as they inevitably do, began to circulate quietly among staff and extended household contacts. In a place where reputation is everything, even whispers carry weight. Some speculated about specific incidents that may have led to Charlotte's statement. Were there moments of impatience, sharp tones, or dismissive gestures? Were there patterns of behavior that Charlotte, with her keen observational skills, had interpreted as unkind? While specifics remained confidential, the mere knowledge that the young princess had formed this impression created a ripple effect, prompting speculation, reflection, and concern among those who managed the household. The palace, with its layered hierarchy, also had to consider the potential implications for family cohesion and public perception. Royals, while human, are acutely aware that private behavior, even among children, can influence narratives if revealed publicly. The staff, understanding the stakes, took careful measures to ensure that Charlotte's words remained within trusted circles. Yet even in these controlled environments, word has a way of traveling. Awareness of the confession reached senior staff, whose responsibility included not only the care of the children but also the preservation of the family's image. This awareness, in turn, shaped their interactions with both Charlotte and Meghan, introducing a layer of subtle tension and heightened attentiveness. The dynamics of rumor in a palace setting are both fascinating and complex. Unlike ordinary workplaces, the palace operates on traditions that span centuries, combining loyalty, observation, and discretion in unique ways. Staff are trained to notice, interpret, and sometimes mediate interpersonal dynamics without breaching confidentiality. When Charlotte's words became known within these circles, it prompted an invisible recalibration. Employees became more attentive to interactions, noting tones, gestures, and behaviors that might influence perceptions. Even minor moments, such as a curt response or a sharp correction, were scrutinized in hindsight, analyzed for potential impact on the young princess. While the immediate circle of Charlotte's caretakers was aware of the confession, whispers inevitably reached wider circles of the household. Staff who interacted with Meghan, whether in administrative, domestic, or ceremonial capacities, began to discuss patterns they had observed. Some accounts suggested that Meghan, in her pursuit of maintaining control and ensuring efficiency, may have occasionally come across as brusque or impatient. Others noted that her interactions were often filtered through the prism of protocol, which could appear formal or detached to a child. Charlotte's words, therefore, acted as a lens through which staff reevaluated their own observations, reinforcing the importance of perspective in interpreting behavior. The palace reaction was also shaped by awareness of public scrutiny. Meghan Markle, already a global figure, was constantly analyzed by media and royal enthusiasts alike. Staff understood that any internal tensions, if leaked, could have significant ramifications for public perception. The fact that Charlotte, a beloved young princess, had expressed discomfort added a layer of sensitivity. The palace hierarchy, recognizing both the emotional and reputational stakes, responded with discretion. Conversations were guided by the principles of confidentiality, empathy, and the well-being of the child, ensuring that Charlotte's experience was managed with care. Rumors, however, have a life of their own. Even when carefully contained, they inspire speculation. Among palace staff, there was curiosity about the nature of Meghan's interactions with Charlotte. Were there specific incidents that triggered the comment? How did other children in the household perceive Meghan's behavior? How would this affect long-term dynamics within the family? These questions, though often unspoken publicly, shaped private discourse, influencing how staff approached interactions and observed household behavior. Social media, though distant from the nursery, adds another layer to this dynamic. In the age of instant reporting and viral speculation, even the faintest rumor has potential to spread beyond palace walls. Staff and family members, aware of this environment, operate with heightened caution. While Charlotte's confession remained private, its existence demonstrates the delicate interplay between private perception and public narrative. Even whispers within the palace can carry outsized weight if they intersect with media interest or public curiosity. The reaction of the royal family itself, while not publicly disclosed, likely involved careful observation and internal discussion. Family members, attuned to household dynamics and the emotional well-being of the children, would have taken note of Charlotte's perspective. The confession is a reminder that even in households defined by tradition and ceremony, children's voices matter. Charlotte's observation required acknowledgement, reflection, and potentially subtle adjustments in behavior to ensure a supportive environment for her development. It is worth noting that palace staff and family alike are trained to contextualize children's statements. Charlotte's perception of meanness, while significant, must be understood within the framework of child psychology. Children interpret actions and words through a lens of emotional honesty, often lacking the broader context adults consider. Staff, particularly those trained in childcare within royal settings, would recognize that her words reflected feelings rather than deliberate judgment or condemnation. Nevertheless, these feelings carry weight and must be addressed with sensitivity and care. Rumors inevitably extended beyond the staff, reaching informal networks connected to palace insiders. Friends, acquaintances, and extended household contacts began to share and speculate, each retelling layering nuance, assumption, and interpretation. While no formal confirmation was available, the mere discussion of Charlotte's statement amplified curiosity and reinforced the importance of perspective. The perception of Meghan's behavior,